You cannot stop him. You can only hope to continue.
Well, the BackChat basketball show, of course, we're back. The final episode of the season. There's no rules. We do what we want. We end the season whenever we want. It's a no man's land time of basketball at the moment. The NBL's finished well and truly. The NBA, the Summer League's just finished. The Cleveland Cavaliers are champions. They can hang their hat on that. But we're in no man's land, like I said, so we're having one last episode. And I promised a big fish, and I feel like I went out in the deep Atlantic Ocean. I don't know whatever ocean is over in the States. And we've snagged one. We've snagged a big one. Bobby Karalla, welcome to the BackChat Basketball Show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. It would be probably the Gulf of Mexico, I guess, is probably the biggest body of water nearby me.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's where you found me.
To be honest, like, geography is if they said, like, you have on a trivia show and they said, give us your worst topic, we'll stay away from that, I would say geography. Like, I have no clue. All I know is that people think Texas is big, and that often Australia, the Western Australia, the state, is often compared to the state of Texas, and it's way bigger, like our state's way bigger. Apart from that, geography. Don't even get me started on geology, bro.
I mean,
that's
they're all the same anyway, right? Yeah,
they're all the same.
Dude, here in America, we know American geography, but outside of this country, couldn't tell you a single thing about the rest of the world, man. I don't even know, is Australia a continent? Is it a country? Is it a city? Who can even say?
It's all of it.
You know,
it's an island. It's the world's biggest island. It's the smallest continent. It's everything. It's that good of a place. Often people think in your part of town that maybe Australia doesn't even exist. Like, it's just some conspiracy place on the map where, you know, people live but don't actually live, and we're somehow alive. But anyways, we're not a Joe Rogan. We're not a conspiracy podcast. We
got plenty of those in the U.S. too. So
that's right. Yeah. Why don't you tell us? Actually, you know what? Before we get into anything about you, we have one question that we ask every single guest on the BackChat, across the BackChat network. Anytime we have a guest, we have one question that we start with. Now, the guy that I usually host podcasts with, Will, he's a championship player in Australian rules football. So we like to bring on athletes, talk about their great sporting achievements, but we don't let them talk about their sort of sphere of, you know, the things that they're good at. So for you, like, no offense, you're not an athlete, so you can do whatever you want. So I want to know, Bobby, your greatest sporting achievement that you've ever done in your life. It could be anything from whatever age group. The greatest thing you've ever done in some sort of sporting sphere.
Man, okay, so I played in an indoor soccer league. 6v6, all men, and we won not the top tier championship. We won the second division championship, 3-1 in the finals. I played maybe 10 minutes in that game, and it was easily the highlight of my athletic career.
That's good, man. So, do you guys call that futsal?
No. So it's like it's futsal.
Because indoor soccer, like the real indoor soccer players, they no, it's called futsal. We don't call it indoor soccer.
Yeah. See, I remember a few years ago, it was actually Donnie Nelson was like spearheading trying to start this futsal league in Dallas.
Right.
I mean, like throughout the U.S., but headquartered in Dallas, and I don't really think it caught on. Over here, we just call it indoor because it's still general soccer rules. Like, we have indoor soccer leagues, we just call it indoor soccer. Although they're playing more like 7-on-7 or 8-on-8. It's a bigger field. But what we were playing, I mean, I don't know if you can call it football, soccer, futsal. It was more just garbage. But we did win. You know, we were the
running
best
around
of that
kicking
group.
a ball.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sometimes into the goal if we were lucky.
Well, that's good. All right. So futsal, I was actually, this is pretty relevant because the Major League Cricket tournament has been getting a bit of coverage. Do you know anything about cricket?
I do. I know a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't say I know a fair amount, but I do know a little bit about cricket because I have some friends in England, and I went over to visit them a couple times. So while I was over there, we were just watching a bunch of test matches. There's a 2020 league that actually started in the U.S. Yes. I think that's what you're talking about. They play all their games like probably 20 minutes away from downtown Dallas, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was watching today.
I know 2020, they're mashing. I mean,
That's right.
they're swinging for the fences every time.
That's right. So I was watching it today. It was like I think, are they hosting the tournament in Dallas or something? Because the New York team was playing someone, and it was woeful. Like it's bad. It's bad cricket.
They
man.
don't have any like legends of the game or anything playing.
Not in America, like because cricket's very like you play for you play for your country, you play. But then other guys go over to India and they play for leagues and in leagues and stuff like that. The pinnacle and the peak is playing and representing your country. Like in a lot of sports, but in cricket particularly, like they do tours around the world playing for your country. And I've never seen like an American tour. Maybe it's like an exhibition thing to try and grow the game, but American cricket, you'll get there. Maybe I don't know if it's hard to hear for you as an American to think that you're not good at something, because I feel like you guys think that the only country in the world is USA, and anything outside is like, well, that doesn't really count. But
It's
you
true.
guys suck at cricket, and eventually you might get good at it. But for now, it's you leave it to the other guys.
We gave the rest of the world a head start, but don't worry. We're going to catch up. We're going to come and beat all y'all down in like 2 or 3 months. All right, so just get ready.
2-3 months.
Yeah.
So tell me what you do for work. So you're involved with the Dallas Mavericks, but like, what do you actually do? I'd say that if I was like, you and I were just walking down the street and a friend of mine came up to me and they were like, oh, who's this? And I said, oh, this is Bobby. I'd basically say anything good that comes out of the Dallas Mavericks, like media division, Bobby's had a hand in. Anything bad, like it's because it wasn't him involved in. So you do media stuff for the Dallas Mavericks, but what, like, I don't know. What do you do?
No, first off, I really appreciate that. I have made some bad things, so I'm not immune to criticism.
Oh, I've seen them.
Yeah. So my role is digital content manager, but pretty much what I do is primarily podcasts, do a little bit of streaming on Twitch and YouTube, do some produced videos on our YouTube channel. Used to write stuff for our website for Mavs.com, and I don't do that as much anymore because we've kind of collectively pivoted to video in this industry now. But that is primarily what I do. I'm more of a like talking head personality. I try to be like a living, breathing Mavs encyclopedia. I just am able to recall all these details, and if not, I'll go research them. Very, very like information-driven, stats-driven kind of guy. With my approach to basketball, but I'm still, trying to keep the eye test. I hold a sacred place for the eye test in my heart, but
Right.
my job is to just know as much about the team as possible and learn as much about the team, as much about the league as possible, and then try and distill and share that information to as many people as possible. So that's if I could boil my job down to like one sentence, that's what I would say.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good job to have, to be honest. I used to work for a basketball team, the Perth Wildcats, which is the Perth team over here in our national competition, who Luke Travers, who has recently signed Melbourne United, who's currently playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers Summer League team. So he's a Summer League champion. He's legit. Like he's a guy that people have been watching for a long time. He's like at a sweet spot in our hearts because he's grown up through our city, and now he's got drafted by the Cavs. So I used to work at the Perth Wildcats and used to do similar content. It was this was 2018, 17ish, so like when everyone was fully pivoting to podcast, video, and stuff like that. But I used to write all of our website content, and I remember a time. Early days, I wrote an article about why the Wildcats lost, and I got called in from the CEO, and he like had the article printed out and he had it on the desk, and he called me into the office and he was like, "Hey man, what do you think about this article?" And I was having to read through, and I was like, "Oh, we lost, and this is why," and I got it. I didn't get like in trouble, but he was like, "You can't write this stuff. Like this is."
Oh no.
Like as much as you want to be like correct and they lost it in the rebounding and all that sort of stuff, when you're writing for a team, presenting like stuff for the team, you don't want to be telling people you're bad. Like you need to have this element of like propping up your team. So how do you deal with that? Because you do a lot of analytical stuff. So how do you walk the line of like not shitting on the team when they're bad, but also like not lying and like just being puff piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some things that are just objectively true about basketball. A lot of that is statistical. So like if the Mavs get out rebounded 53 to 37, like I don't even need to say it. Like everyone knows. We watch the game, so like but there's also what good is it to just like relentlessly just dunk on guys and say like you better learn Chinese, buddy, because you're going to go play for the Shanghai Sharks. Like that's just so beyond the line to me, because these are still like 15 of the 500 or 600 best players in the world that are on this roster, right? And so like they're still very good. I don't need to be disrespectful toward them or toward the team or whatever. But again, some things are just very objective. I think where like the line is sort of blurred between, are you just rose-colored glasses guy, or I guess blue-tinted glasses guy because the Mavs are blue and white, or are you being objective reporter guy, is what is your perspective on things like just bad luck? Like last season, for example, the Mavs were a mediocre to below average defensive rebounding team, but opponents, when they got an offensive rebound against the Mavs, had the highest true shooting percentage on second chance field goal attempts in the entire database, this site called PBP Stats. It goes all the way back, I think, either 99 2000 or 2000 2001. The highest true shooting percentage on second chance field goal attempts in the history of that website. So this is like almost 25 years of basketball.
Right.
And so like they were fine. They were fine to bad at defensive rebounding, but were they historically bad at second chance field goal attempts defense, or were they historically unlucky, or were they just both? Like that's where I just throw my hands up in the air and say I don't know. I watched a lot of second chance points against the Mavs last season, but I watched it on a pretty league average amount of offensive rebounds. So like that's where it's hard to be super objective, and it's hard to be real downer doomer guy, because like some things are just inexplicable. That's where as more of like a data driven guy, I would say I need a couple years to know if this is true or if this is just like a weird sort of happenstance in the course of the universe. So yeah, it's kind of tough. It is kind of tough to walk the line, but there's a lot of examples like that pop up where it's just like, man, I could be just real angry and aggro and mean. I could be like, it's gonna be fine, guys, or I could just not say anything.
Yeah.
Because not everything needs a reaction, so that's kind of
exactly.
that's try the balance that I try and find.
Also, it's hard for you with 82 games. It's relentless. It's 4 games a week.
Mm-hmm.
With like me, we would at the Wildcats we would have 1 game a week, sometimes a double header on a weekend. So you'd play 2 games a week. Like there's a bit of space in between. Things can like sort of boil over, or like sort of people forget about things. But like if it is a rough season, like last season towards the back end, and every second day you're like, well, they can't defend again. Like, there's only so many times you can say the same thing without it being like, shit, do the Mavs like the actual website, do they hate the team? Like, so
yeah, I mean,
yeah, it must be
there's
tricky.
just so many games. Yeah, there's so many games, and sometimes things will reach a fever pitch. Like sometimes you're gonna get blown out by the Hornets, and it's like, okay, this is beyond repair, right? But sometimes it's just, I mean, the other team just hit 22 threes. Like,
yeah,
it happens. The Mavs just did that to someone the other day. Like, it's gonna, over the course of 82 games, bad things are gonna happen, good things are gonna happen, and you just go on. I mean, not every game has to be a referendum on something.
that's right. And fans, and for me, right? So I'm a fan of the Mavs, and I'm also a fan of the West Coast Eagles, the AFL team. We can talk AFL in a minute.
Okay.
They're historically bad, the West Coast Eagles, right? So in the AFL, they have 24 rounds in a season, and in the last probably 2 to 3 seasons, they've won 4 games. Like, it's awful.
Like total?
Total. It's really
Is there
bad.
there's no relegation or anything?
No relegation.
So they're just stuck. Oh.
They're just bad. So they won a championship in 2018. 2019, they were okay. 2020, like, stuff happened. Like, COVID sort of started to come in. Then, like, a lot of guys got injured and stuff. But the last 2-3 seasons have been brutal. So I can't remember why. I think that they're just things that have, like, sitting in my soul that just flow out. I don't even know I started talking about how bad the West Coast Eagles are, but but you know, like when things are just bad, like you just got to roll with it. And sometimes it's just things are bad and you can't go any further. Have you always been a Mavs guy?
Yeah, my whole life
Yeah.
since birth. Yeah, and kind of the one advantage that I had in terms, I guess, like watching basketball or whatever, is that my dad was a coach. Not only he just coached kind of everything at a middle school, high school level. So it's not like he's a pro coach or anything. But watching games with him, I kind of started watching the game more through that like X's and O's, analytical, intangible sort of stuff is what I really pay attention to, more so than just getting emotionally wrapped up in what's going on. So I've always kind of been more of like a, I guess, objective viewer of basketball, more so than just like a pure fan, I guess.
Yeah, as a fan, you do get it like just emotionally attached, and so
Mhm.
when things are going like average or sort of good, you just don't really think about it. You're like, great, you know, things are going well. But like when things are bad, I think this is why I was thinking about how bad the West Coast Eagles are. When things are bad, like you want to react to it, and people talk about things more. So how do you? So then you must see a lot of shit that comes through from fans, right? Because you're on the forefront of a lot of what the Mavs put out. So when you're constantly getting berated and like just negative fan stuff, like do you just go like forget it, like they'll do what they want to do, like we can't change anything, or like do you deal with that at all?
I mean the main thing is you have to have like a, I guess, a boundary or like a line when if people are talking to you. I know people are gonna want to let off steam, and so if they do so like at least pseudo respectfully, then that's cool. But if it's like insult, I always just like have a really hard time whenever people say that a guy is trash. It's like that's
Yeah,
just so mean and so like you're
it's lazy.
dehumanizing
It's
this
also
guy.
lazy.
Yeah, like he's trying hard. He's the other dude is better. You know, like he's not
Yeah,
trash. He's just like
yeah,
he's just fine. So that's where it gets weird. Or if someone starts calling me names, it's kind of weird. But after this past season, and this is like for reasons beyond just the Mavs having a below 500 record, but I actually just got off Twitter because it's just too much. It's just too much. And as like Mavs guy, you know, to many people, you know, I have no relationship with a lot of people that followed me on Twitter, and there was thousands of people that followed me or whatever. And so to them, you know, we have this kind of parasocial relationship where I am Mavs person that is a part of their Mavs viewing experience. So
yeah.
I
It's
would
partly your fault.
yeah, and like I would forgive someone for like not being able to distinguish the difference between just like dude that works here versus like the team or Mark Cuban or whoever, you know, your problem is with. But I'm the conduit through which you can feel like you're talking to them. And I just don't want to be that guy. Like, I don't know. Whenever the Mavs win, my life is fine. When they lose, my life is fine. I don't want a bunch of people to just vent to me. I don't know. It's a lot of emotional labor, Dan, and I can only carry
Yeah,
so much of that around. You know what I mean?
life's short, man. You don't want to be dealing with all of that as well as all the other shit that you have to deal with personally.
Yeah.
So
But
you
then,
just
sorry,
mentioned,
I just want to say, like, that passion is what makes sports so fun.
oh
And
yeah,
that's the thing that I grapple with is like, well, what would I rather them just not care? Like, would I rather
yeah,
them just like, so it is kind of, you know, I don't want to be a wet blanket and say, hey, don't get mad. Because then, like, why would I get happy? Like, if you don't have a low, then how can you have a high? But also, it's 82 games, like you said. It's just, there's even the best teams lose 25 times, you know, so like
yeah,
you're going to be disappointed a little bit.
yeah. And even the best teams don't win at the end as well. So
Hmm.
you know, it's not. There's like one team at the end that gets to be happy. Everyone else is probably pretty pissed. So you just mentioned you got off Twitter. So I was thinking, you and I used to like interact a little bit on Twitter, and then when I was talking to Tim Cato, our friend of the family of the basketball show here, I was like, I might just hit Bobby up on Twitter. He's like, no, he's gone. And I thought, yeah, you know what? Haven't seen Bobby on Twitter for a while. So was that purely just because of last season, or is that like, I mean, there are people getting off Twitter. So is that just a thing? Is your life better? Because I've been thinking about it.
I would say that my life is better. Yes. I think just my day-to-day life is better, and not because like I still have to view tweets for various reasons. I still have to like study fan sentiment. I still operate the Studio 41 Twitter account. Like I'm still on the platform, but I don't post stuff. I don't interact with people. No one interacts with me. And that has made just my day-to-day life better because there's just so much negativity in the world. And a lot of it is there's rightful reasons to feel negative about the state of the world in many cases.
Yeah.
But some of that anger, I feel like, is just a little misguided. And it's
So are
really
you running
nice
like
that-
some sort of burner just to observe tweets, or are you how are
yeah,
you
well,
doing?
we have there's a Studio 41 is like
Right.
our production part of the company, and I post
Yep.
tweets on that account, so I still
Right.
go on there and just like see, because it is important for me to know what the fans are talking about. Like,
Yeah.
do fans like Omax Prosper? What do they like about him? What do they not understand about him? That gives me ideas for what to do, on my next stream or next podcast or whatever. So I still have to really
Research.
keep tabs on. Yeah, it's research.
Yeah, of course.
But whenever it's not like, I'm just viewing the public opinion and I'm just digesting what people are thinking, as opposed to, for example, one of the last tweets I posted was the Mavs played the Kings like game 80 of the season. Season was pretty much already over by that point, whatever. Domantas Sabonis for the Kings, like 4 times down the floor in a row, 4 offensive possessions in a row, just made the coolest passes. I'm talking like no looks, behind the backs, like drawing a double team, flipping it over his head, just like the coolest stuff. And I just tweeted like, wow, Domantas Sabonis is really good. Like that, like, I just appreciating how good that guy is. And someone came in and was like, well, yeah, Dwight Powell is guarding him. What do you expect? And I'm like, dude, brother, like, he passed the ball. Like, it's not, he didn't even score on him. He passed the ball. Like, the dude is he's an all-star. He's incredible. Just, this guy is so good. Like, can I not just say that this guy is good? And it was like, I just can't do it anymore because, again, because, and I'm going to forgive the guy for that because, like, again, I'm Mavs guy. So everything that I say is related to the Mavs. So if I say Domantas Sabonis is good, it's because he is doing it against Dwight Powell or against Maxi Kleber or against JaVale McGee or whatever, which means he is better than the Mavs, which that's going to light the hatred fire in someone else's heart, and they're going to let me know about it. And I just don't want to do that anymore, because, again, I'm just appreciating how good this dude is at basketball. Please don't kill my vibe,
Yeah, how
and
dare
the Mavs
you enjoy
won the game
basketball.
anyway. They won the game.
Yeah. Speaking of Twitter, so like I'm sure you have seen this Dropping Dimes 50 account.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? Because so we talked about it a couple of weeks ago with someone. It's basically like this egg avatar Twitter account who's leaking news before Shams, before Woj, like for all these guys. What do you think it is?
Man, so that first one, Dropping Dimes 20, that one seemed legit. And whenever that person posted Kyrie Irving, you could feel the tremors like around the world. Like, oh my God, is he leaving or what? But then it got taken down, and it feels like there's just a bunch of imitators now running around, masquerading as the real Dropping Dimes. So I just don't know what to believe about, like, there's Dropping Dimes 50, Dropping Dimes 55, Dropping Dimes 27. I think they're all just fake. And there's another one, NBA Insider Goat, who I also think is a fake. But the thing is, there's so much information out there, and it's pretty easy to connect the dots and just say like, what was like Fred VanVleet going to Houston? Like, it was pretty obvious. So if you
look around at who's got cap space and stuff like that, and he wants to get paid, like you could make an educated guess.
Yeah, and also it helps that 3 hours before he posted that, Mark Stein said Fred VanVleet is probably going to go to the Rockets. So you're just kind of piggybacking off what other people say. But I don't know, man. That first Dropping Dimes account, that was awfully specific, and
it was.
I don't know if that was a player. I don't know if it was an agent. I don't know if it was someone with a bone to pick. But I do you think that you would rather live the rest of your life not knowing who Dropping Dimes was, or do you want to know? Like, what outcome do you think is better? You do?
I absolutely want to know because the unknown is like, is it real or not? But if you find out the person and it's actually Shams and he's bored, like, because he's just doing it all the time, and he's like, fuck, I'm gonna start tweeting stuff that I don't know is legit or not, and I can't put this on my personal account. That's interesting. I think it's more interesting to knowing who it is, and then if it's like randomly, like, I don't know, it's like Lamar Odom or something, like that's just like got intel with an agent, like, wouldn't that be fun as opposed to just never knowing? Because yeah, I've started following Dropping Dimes 50 because I feel like that one's got a lot of following and that's been tweeting some stuff. But yeah, not knowing what it is, I think about it too much. I'm like lying in bed thinking, who could it possibly be?
But what if it's like some low level, I don't mean to, insult someone, but what if it's like the
Go on.
lowest person on the organizational chart,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be kind of anticlimactic. Like, I want it to be Lamar Odom. I want it to be LeBron.
I don't know why I picked Lamar Odom.
I think that would be incredible if it was.
The thing is, right, so you've worked in a team, I've worked in a team, like, you get given information that you can't pass out, right? Like, that So I've been in meetings where we're like, CEOs, like, we're 88% certain that we're signing this guy, bringing him in, or this person's done for the season, or whatever. Like, you could easily just tweet that out, but, so maybe it is just a lower, like a you and I guy, pleb, running around, hearing stuff that you're trusted enough to be in an inner circle. But I don't know, that's risky. If you are on a lower end side of things, then maybe it's not worth risking a job over getting some clout over a tweet that nobody knows who you actually are.
Yeah, I mean, the secret is fun, but then, yeah, once you're found out. But then again, Secret Service can't even find out who brought coke to the White House, so like maybe no one's gonna get caught for anything.
I think we all know who did that. Let's be honest.
There's no rules on this podcast. There ain't no rules over here either, buddy.
Yeah. So all right. So Dropping Dimes, whatever. I want to believe. You know what? I want to believe it's also just like some 16-year-old kid who somehow has a line directly to a source, and they're just feeding him stuff because they know, like, no one's gonna believe him. It's just fun. I can just share stuff. How long have you been with the Mavs for?
2015-16 was my first season full time. 2013-14 I started part time. So if my math is correct, this is my 10th season. That just happened. Yeah, I'm old. I'm old and washed, dude.
Very old, yeah. What about memories of 2011? Like, so a championship year for the Mavs. You were obviously a fan at that point, but not working for the team. What do you remember about the build up and actually winning a championship? It's because, like, I'm an adopted Mavs fan. I picked them because I watched I watched Desanya Diop like dominate one game in like 2004, and I was like, yep, these are my guys, and for some reason I picked them. But for you, as someone like who's followed them all your life, do you remember much of that time?
Oh yeah, 2011. I mean, I remember everything, man. I remember everything. That entire season, it really felt like, it's hard for me to look back and like remember my exact emotional thoughts as a fan, but like purely from an objective standpoint, if you look at all of the information about that 2010-11 Mavs team, from opening night until Dirk gets hurt, which is around New Year's Eve, they were the best team in the NBA. Like, by record, all of their offensive rating, defensive rating, like, they were easily the best team in the league. They beat a bunch of teams with winning records. Like, they were incredible. Dirk goes down, and without him, they go 2-9. He comes back, and they just rattle off a bunch more wins. So at the end of the year, they're 57-25, I think was their record. 55-18 whenever Dirk played, which is pretty nasty,
Yeah.
And yet going into the playoffs, they were considered this underdog for obvious reasons. Historically, just the previous year they lost in the first round as a 2 seed, so it's not like they were world beaters by any stretch. But as they just kept winning and kept winning and kept winning, and they got past the Brandon Roy game in Game 4 against Portland, and then they won their next 7 games in a row. Like, it just felt like with every single game they were getting better, and the belief started getting stronger, like, in the fan base. I think the players were always pretty confident, but just collectively, Dallas, just the city, just the fan base, the whole community just kind of felt like, yeah, this is gonna happen. Eventually it turns from this is fun to this is destiny. And I don't know if it's the Corey Brewer game against the Lakers, in game 1, or if it's game 4 when they just blew them off the court, or the comeback against OKC in game 4, or maybe it was all the way to the comeback against Miami in game 2. Like, it just felt like this is just the team of mother bleeping destiny. Like
Yeah.
nothing was going to stop them. They were just coated in this plot armor. Dirk was sick. It didn't matter. They still won the game. Like, it just, nothing could stop them. But there were signs there the whole season, like the 5-man lineup, like Kidd, Jet, Marion, Dirk, Tyson Chandler. Their net rating that season was like absurd. They're like plus 25, but they just never played because I felt like they were kind of trying to keep it a secret. Like, they were just so good, just a juggernaut hiding in plain sight, and they just win after win. It's just like, yeah, I mean, you went from being surprised to like being like this. You just expected it to happen. And so, yeah, I don't know. It just it is hard to look back and just be like very emotional about it, but obviously you tied so much of this to Dirk, because of how many times he failed, how many times you were actually upset. Like in 2006, driving home from game 6 of the finals, I was crying in the car on the way home. Like, I was 15 years old, just sobbing. You can only overcome so many failures before you finally achieve success. Like, eventually you just run out of time, and the Mavs were about to run out of time. And they took advantage of the moment. So it was just a beautiful thing. The most like relatable, most cliche, most storybook, most like hero's journey kind of finish for those guys, and they pulled it off, which is just it's unbelievable. But like at the time, it also was super believable because they just were the best team in the NBA that season. So it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around like the underdog thing while also knowing just how good they were.
It was also like, given that the LeBron Heat thing was such a force, right? So like any team coming up against them, you would think, well, they've just like, for me, like I was a fan since early thousands, but that felt like the first time that like a super team was really formed, and I was like, how the fuck are the people going to beat these guys? So that underdog thing. But you're right, like there was so many moments through that run, like that sort of defined their run. So like comebacks, perfect shooting games, ridiculous outburst by Corey Brewer or like Jet. Like there's so many good like hang your hat on moments through that season. I remember, and I might be wrong, but I feel like there was a preseason game in that year that they played Houston, and the Mavs, I think, were down by 1 with 0.6 left on the game, and Jason Kidd launched his pass over Yao Ming. Maybe was Yao Ming still in the league, and Sean Marion caught it and like laid it in, and I'm pretty sure that was like not even a regular season game, but that was like a preseason game. And I remember them doing that, thinking like, this team's pretty, like there's something about this team. I may be wrong with my years, but I feel like it was that same year. You might remember that lane.
I think it was that year. The most unbelievable thing about that play to me is, why are your starters in the game in the final second of a preseason game? Like, what are we doing?
They really wanted to win.
Yeah, but if you go back, like starting in 04, 04-05 is the first Dirk season in Dallas post Nash. So it was Dirk. Michael Finley stayed there for 1 year, and then he left, and it totally became Dirk's team. From 2005 to 2007, the Mavs won like 80% of their clutch games. I mean, coin flip games, they won almost all of them because Dirk was just that good. Jason Terry was just that good. And then you also get Jason Kidd in here too. And then you also get Sean Marion, who has a bunch of experience, and you get Tyson Chandler, great defender. So like 2011 was in many ways a culmination of, there was a lot of failure in big moments, but there was a ton of individual and team successes in all of the small moments along the way too. And they were just finally able to break through and just do it. It was something very magical. Like, it is almost unbelievable because of how perfectly it all went. But also, like, they were really just that good. I don't know. It's just a bunch of old dudes that know what they're doing. Many of which are like, maybe they're not Hall of Famers, but they're generational players. Like the Mavs, they were all 35 years old, but like that was kind of a super team too. If you really, I guess, think about it, maybe not as sexy as the Heat, but they had a lot of talent and a lot of experience. a lot of know-how, and they were able to put it all together. The more interesting thing to me is, could a team that, sure, they knew what they were doing, but could a team that unathletic, relatively speaking, no offense to those guys, but that slow, that ground bound, that limited, as far as like they couldn't switch everything in this era, with Dirk and an older kid and Jason Terry, like they would have to play a little more careful defensively. Like, how good would that team be today? Was that like the perfect moment in time for that collection of players? Because like even 3 years later, could you imagine that team trying to defend the Warriors? Like, I don't know if they could have done it. So I'm really happy they won it when they did.
Yeah, perfect prime opportunity, caught lightning in a bottle, all of that. Yeah, good times. I remember taking like random days off work. I remember putting in my leave request when the final schedule was put in, and I was like saying to my boss, I'm gonna have Monday off, Wednesday off, and then the following Tuesday, the following Thursday. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm gonna watch the finals, right?" Because for me, as a in Australia, we watch games at like between 9 to midday, right? So you can't just watch it at night and come home from work and do whatever. Like, you got to give up your whole day and
I mean, are you cracking one open at like 8 a.m.? Like, what are you doing?
No, having coffee and toast or like some cereal or something. But the later games, if it's like 3/4 time and it's close and it's 11:40, I'm like, okay, like this is acceptable. But
yeah, might as well, right?
Of course, may as well. What about Australian players? So obviously, Australian podcast, a lot of focus on Australian basketball. The Mavs have had quite a good contingent of Australian, a lot of Australian players anyway, considering how many Australian guys have made it to the NBA. So, currently Josh Green, Dante Exum, new signing. I'm going to count Kyrie Irving. Why not? Because he's Australian. We're going to claim him. Why won't he come play for Australia in the Olympics? Like, it would be a good story. He should do that, but he's not going to, of course. Ryan Broekhoff, who, shout out to Ryan Broekhoff, just retired from the NBL, our national league. So he's focusing on other stuff with family. He just had a baby. Big fan of Ryan. He's been on this pod.
He's a great guy, man.
One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Of course, Andrew Bogut. We'll just keep going through names. What are your thoughts on the Australian guys that have come through?
Yeah, Mitch Creek too. He was on the Mavs summer league team and ended
up.
I think he was on a 2-way or a 10-day or something. He stuck around in the league for a little bit.
And then he went to Timberwolves, I think, and now he's playing at Southeast Melbourne. He's like their star at Southeast Melbourne Phoenix over in the NBL, who played alongside Ryan Broekhoff. So it's all in circles.
It's all connected, man. Yeah, I mean, I remember. So this is in 2018. It was right before Luka's rookie year. I was talking to one of the Mavs scouts at the time, and he said, like, Australia is the next frontier. Because by then, there are some Americans that are still kind of in denial about this, but it is pretty widely accepted that Europe is legitimate and that players that are in EuroLeague and players that are even in the lower levels, lower domestic levels can play basketball, and they are good enough to be in the NBA. And NBA has an Africa academy set up, and they have a league over there. I think it's called the BAL, and there's a pipeline through Africa, Asia. Players from East Asia have been in the league for a while, but Australia was kind of this like, I don't know, just kind of like Bogut made it through, and a couple other guys made it through. But then at some point in the last 5 or 10 years, maybe it's because the Australian Basketball League has started really picking up, and there's a lot of quality talent down there, with a lot of American investors in those teams, including Sean Marion, who I think is involved with the Breakers. New Zealand is like, I know that New Zealand is a separate country, but how is New Zealand in the Australian League? Like, is it pretty practical to get from New Zealand to Australia?
Not really. I would say it's similar to the weird, like, you guys are connected by land, so like the fact that Canada has a team in the US league, it's just like, where else would they go? And it sort of makes sense. So for me to fly to so for Perth to, say, Auckland, it's a huge flight. Like, it's bigger than any sort of west to east coast flight that you guys might do. Yeah. But it's like, where else do they go? It makes sense for them to be here. And they've been really successful. Like, usually, I'd say, like, stereotypically or generally speaking, like, those countries that are involved in leagues like this, they're usually just there as like they're making up numbers at times, but the breakers have been like really successful. So it is sort of weird that it's another country, but we Australia like to claim Kiwis, as we call them, when they're like, like Hugh Jackman. Is Hugh Jackman? Who's the guy? Who's X-Man?
I think that's him. He was also in the hit musical Australia, I think, right?
Yes, that's right. So Hugh Jackman, I think, might be a Kiwi. Oh no, Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe, I think, is a Kiwi. But like everyone's like, he's an Australian because I think
the only Kiwi I really know is Peter Jackson, of course, the great
Lord of the
Peter
Rings.
Jackson. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I can't remember what the question was, but yeah, we sort of just bring them in. They're like a brother from another mother.
Okay, from several time zones away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I think like that very reason is probably why it was really hard for Australian players to break into the NBA, let's say 10 years ago, because it is so dang far away, right?
Yeah.
And there wasn't, I know that the Australian League has been around probably for longer than 5 years, but now that the best Australian players can just stay home and be in this league where there's already American investors, so there's American interest, there's American eyeballs on these guys. And also, too, I think, the same could be said for guys going to, like, EuroLeague, for example. I know Ryan Broekhoff played for Lokomotiv Kuban, I think, is like a really, really high-level Russian team before he came over to the Mavs. Yeah. I think the rest of the world is just kind of, like, accessing Australia in ways that they didn't really do before, and so there's just more eyeballs. So maybe there were great Australian players even 30 years ago, but they just didn't really get as much of a chance because of the practicality of it all. But I mean, the national team is kicking ass, at the Olympics. Like every year, they're just getting better and better. They're medaling. They destroyed Slovenia in the bronze medal game a couple years ago, so that was really impressive to see. And you're just seeing like young guys, you're seeing polished vets, you're seeing young guys like Josh Green that know how to play. And Josh, I guess, grew up, he went to high school in America, but like you could be an Australian kid and stay in Australia and then just make the jump directly from Australia to the NBA. Like it is possible to do that now, whereas before it just really wasn't. So it was interesting hearing that from a scout 5 years ago saying like Australia is like the next place. And now over the last 5 years, just seeing this massive influx of guys, and then also American players playing in the Australian League, like what LaMelo did and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool too.
There is this appeal that, like, with the college system not paying players, where it's like, the NBL, they've got a program called the Next Stars program where they will pay players who are maybe fringe guys who like might go in the second round of the draft, or like might be stash guys, where the NBL's got a program in place now where they can bring them over and say, hey, come play in our league. You're playing against like grown men, they're professionals. It's really high quality. You can get paid, and we have a pathway now to the NBA. We've seen guys do it over and over again, like LaMelo. Josh Giddey played, like, he will be a max contract guy, one of the, probably will go down as one of the best Australian players ever because he's insanely good. So they've shown that there is a pathway from the National Basketball League over to the NBA. So like I mentioned with Luke Travers, who plays for Cleveland, and I think he was drafted between pick 40 and 60 in the second round, playing in the summer league team. He's like from a place called Rockingham over here, and I can't think of a place in Dallas that would, like I said, geography is not my thing, but it's just like an hour out of the city. Like nothing good happens in Rockingham. No offense to anyone in Rockingham, but he's just like this kid that's come out of nowhere, and he's very good at basketball. And I really hope he's got a tough road ahead. Like he wasn't playing for Duke or Kansas or anything like that. He's come from like, he's really climbing that ladder. So there definitely is the pathway. Do you notice, is there any sort of like cultural sort of things that happen with these guys that come over? Like a lot of them go to college and then, so they're sort of, it's not like they're brand new. It's not like Luka coming over to the Mavs and being like, man, the US is weird. Have you dealt with much of that Australian stuff with them coming over?
I don't really think I'm sure culturally there are huge differences between America and Australia. That goes without saying, but like the language is the same.
Yeah.
Maybe expressions are different, but I think the language barrier ultimately is like the biggest obstacle that, let's say, European or African or Asian players have to overcome, or South American players too, speaking Spanish. But if you can just speak English, it's so much easier to get to know guys. It's so much easier to take coaching. It's so much easier to be able to just like literally ask your coach, like, hey, what do you think I should do? And be able to communicate in, fluent full sentences and everything. It's just, it gives you a huge advantage over guys that might otherwise struggle with that stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest burden that a lot of international players have to carry, and the fact that Australian players don't have to do that, I think, is really good. Coupled with the fact that, too, I mean, just again, there's just a lot more. Well, I can't speak to the lower levels of Australian basketball, like youth basketball programs and things like that. But I know the NBA has an academy in Australia. Obviously, again, the NBL has a lot of interest from American basketball programs, and so I feel like that there's a much clearer like pathway and a much clearer bridge connecting Australia to the NBA than there was in, say, even like Spain, like pre-Luka.
Yeah.
It feels like a much smoother process. I'm not sure if that's true though.
Well, I wish I had that when I was coming out of primary school into high school. Maybe a pathway for me to pursue basketball as a professional athlete. I didn't have that. I'm 5'6", 5'7" in shoes. It was never.
Jelly
It's never
Walker,
meant to.
same thing, man. You could have been him.
It's never meant to be. I'm gonna be honest. I'm very unathletic. I'm rocking a dad bod right now. I'm wearing a hoodie right now because it's cold, but it's also just to cover the dad bod. One last one. I've kept you longer than I said I would, so I apologize. One last one before we finish off. Last episode of the BackChat Basketball Show for the season. Before we have a little break. Can you give me your favorite Dirk memory for your time being in the team? So not like pre like fandom time, like times when you've been working at the team.
Man, it's tough. The first memory that came to my mind is the night that he scored, that he reached 30,000 points. He comes out of the tunnel for layup lines pregame, and earlier in the day, like, he'd seen the 30K shirts on the seats and all that stuff. It's gonna be this huge milestone. This is the
How
Mavs'
far off
last
was he?
home game, before a road trip, and like, he's just like, why are you putting all this pressure on me to do this tonight? Like, he had to score, I think, whatever it was, 20 points, I think. And at this point, he's 38 years old and he's averaging like 12 a game. Like, it's really hard for him to score that much in a game. But he comes out of the tunnel, pregame layup line, and I'm sitting way down low. It was one of the few games that I've sat courtside for. And he comes out of the tunnel and, like, swear to God, he turns the corner and we lock eyes for like maybe 0.2 seconds, but it felt like for about an hour. And like, I just saw a different look in his face than I'd seen in 5 years. Like, he just looked extremely locked in, and he comes out and he scores whatever it was. He got to 30K like a minute into the second quarter. He had 20 points in the game, had 25 points at halftime. It was just unbelievable. And like, we looked right at each other, and I just saw he looked like a cyborg that was about to just destroy the planet. Like, he just looked so laser focused. And at that age too, because we'd all kind of thought, like, he's old, the team sucks, like, the competitive fire, I'm sure, is there, but like, can he get to that place? And he did, and it was amazing. And I got to sit like 10 feet away from him while he was doing it. That one, or 41-21 his last home game in 2019. He comes out, scores 30 points. The crowd is just going nuts the whole game. Luka had a triple-double. It felt very symbolic, handing over the torch, the new era and all that stuff. And, he grabs the mic after the game. And for like weeks and months leading up to that game, we all, on the business side, we all pretty much knew this was it. We didn't know for sure, but like, we pretty much knew. But we had to keep it a secret, and we didn't expect Dirk to talk about it. Like, we expected him to address it after the fact, but he just did it right there, live on the court in front of everybody, and that was shocking. But just seeing like his emotional reaction to him saying that, like, it finally like sunk in that he's gonna retire once he said it, and then he lost it, the crowd lost it, everyone is crying and cheering, and like, freaking like Larry Bird is right there, and Scottie Pippen and Charles Barkley. Like, it was just amazing. So those are probably a tie for first. One is, me getting a very up close and personal glimpse into like the soul of this ultimate competitor, this all-time great person at his craft. And then the other one is like, this guy gave everything that he could possibly ever give to this organization and to the fans and to us and to just everybody. And then for him to finally be able to just like kick his feet up and say, like, I don't have any more to give. Like, I'm done. I'm ready for the next chapter. And then for us to be able to thank him for it right there was just, it was just such a beautiful moment, and two things that I will never, ever forget for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've seen players go out in like pretty bad fashion. They get like 2 minutes in the game just to appear. So for Dirk to be able to do that was very special. One time that Dirk and I locked eyes was when I was in Dallas at the start of would have been 2018, and I was doing some interviews in the locker room after a game. And I don't know if this is a thing, but I think it was that like post game Dirk would shower and then he'd come talk to the media, but like he wouldn't dry himself. Like he would he'd just come out in a towel, be dripping. Like the guy didn't put a towel through his hair or like arms or anything. And I just remember, because I'm like I said, 5'7" in shoes, standing next to him, like holding my phone out, like recording this interview, and my arm was just like his body water was just dripping on my arm, and he like he could just see that I was just standing there copping his shower water, so not the same sort of level of like cool meeting eyes as he's about to drop 30, as he's about to score his 30,000th point, just dropping shower water on me. But I'll remember that. That was an interesting
It's still a
thing.
moment, though, and you haven't cleaned your arms since. The funny thing about that is, like, you're right, he didn't really ever dry himself, and so sometimes, like, we'd have this towel wrapped around him, and then he'd throw it into this bin right in the middle of the locker room that's just full of used towels. It's just, I mean, it's, obviously they're clean, but, like, it's nasty,
Yeah.
But every now and then he'd throw it, and it would like, he wouldn't see you standing there, and it would just land on you. And it landed on me, and I was like, this towel is actually pretty dry. Like, it doesn't even feel like it's been used, So I don't know whether to be grossed out or like honored, but either way, I'll savor it,
It's just there for looks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much for giving up your time. I know this is a bit of a well, not really. When you're working for a team, there's never dead patches, but like summer league's over. Now we just wait for the proper season to start, things to start kicking off. So thanks for giving up some time. BackChat Basketball Show, we're going to have a little break, a few months. I don't know the exact date that we'll be back, but it will be 2 to 3 months away. We'll put stuff up on socials, BackChat_basketball. Send us an email, hello@backchatpodcast.com.au. We've got a bunch of stuff planned for next year, some more Mavs stuff in the works, as well as some coaches and stuff we'll be talking in the NBL. Bobby, thanks again, and we'll chat to you next time.
Thank you, man.